And we're back from a little bit of a hiatus there. Like 1 week hiatus. It felt
Yeah.
longer than that. We did a lot in that week. We just got back from a bachelor party.
Yes.
That's why no pod last week. But this
Nope.
week we got a big one. And so that probably means there will be no podcast next week because I will be recovering from this podcast on a beach in Florida. So
There we go.
you'll not be hearing from me for at least 2 weeks. So if Logan wants to put out his own solo podcast, I'll leave that discretion up to him.
Oh, okay.
But I doubt he'll do that.
Yeah.
Probably not.
No.
No.
Find me on our Facebook for some written articles about wrestling in Detroit.
Yeah, you have a lot of time to pump those out.
Yep.
As you can hear, Logan's pop back there. She
Yep.
I think she knows what we're about to talk about.
Yeah. She does. She always looks away when we're watching Over the Edge and Owen fell.
Yep. That's what we're gonna try to tackle this week. It's Over the Edge, 1999, 25 years later.
It's crazy that it's crazy that it's 25 years, but it's also crazy that it's only been 25 years.
Yeah, we were what, 3 years old when this happened, so it's not
Yes.
something in our minds. So it feels a lot longer than that. But it was kind of around the time where we would, at least for me personally, like 2 years after this was when I would really start getting into wrestling.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm kind of putting this out as a kind of a spiritual successor to our Montreal Screwjob podcast, which is also titled, I think it's called Montreal 25 Years Later.
Yes.
So that'll be linked in the description. You don't have to listen to that one first or anything. But the themes kind of carry on from that one to this one. Actually, if you want to put time into perspective, say this is back in 25 years ago, we did the Bret Hart episode and released it the same month the Screwjob happened. And then now we're doing it the same month that Over the Edge 1999 happened. So now the same amount of time has passed from the Screwjob to...
Wow.
So if you kind of want to contextualize that in your head now of when we recorded that, like, it seems like a little while ago, but actually in reality it was not that long ago. It was only about a year and a half.
Yeah, both of these events are huge in not only the WWF landscape, but the wrestling landscape as a whole. And they're not really talked about as being so close in age. It's kind of like that weird... I don't know if your history teacher always flaunted this fact, but if Anne Frank would have lived, she would have been the same age as Martin Luther King.
Yeah.
It's kind of that thing where you don't picture the Screwjob and Owen almost in the same universe, even though they both involve a heart. It just seems like two different time periods.
Yeah, well, the WWF at the time was so drastically different in that year and a half.
Yeah.
Like The Rock and Stone Cold were megastars, bona fide stars at this point. But when the Screwjob happened, not so much. The Rock the Stone Cold, the writing was on the wall for him. He was about to win the title at Mania that year. But yeah, it's kind of. We'll just throw this out here right now. Any jokes, any laughs that we have is meant as no disrespect to Owen or his family. That's just how we handle things, especially a sensitive topic like this.
Yes.
I think it'd be disingenuous if we came on here and pretended to be like a serious podcast, because we've never been. This has never been a serious podcast, really. like the most serious episode we did on Benoit, we,
Mm.
we had a lot of jokes in that one. So I apologize ahead of time if anything we say in here offends you in any way. That's not our point. But back to the subject at hand here. Yeah, you talk about how Montreal and Over the Edge '99 was so pivotal in wrestling and WF. You can point to these two things, and what happens between them, and then shortly after this is kind of like the downfall of the Hart family.
Oh yeah,
Like
100%.
especially because Montreal it was a Brett thing. Like I don't want. Obviously, the Brett it was something very important.
Yes.
Like in the grand streams of real life, it wasn't really that serious. But this is life and death. Somebody has
Literally.
died, and as I do personally, before we cover like a certain topic as big as this, I turn to one of our favorite podcasts where I draw a lot of inspiration from, and that's the Laps Fan. They're linked in our Spotify actually, along with Windley as our other podcasts to check out that we recommend. So go check them out. And they did an episode on this and Montreal and stuff like that. The way they put it, which is really interesting, is how I'm going to try and frame this as well.
Okay.
Is if you want to talk about Owen Hart and Over the Edge 1999, you have to take sides. There's two sides to this. There's the side where this was just an accident. WWF and Vince McMahon are not liable to anything, and then there's the side that this was malicious.
Okay.
We're gonna try our best here to provide every angle here. We have a couple of books here from the Internet Archive that we're gonna look at. Martha Hart's book, Broken Hearts: The Life and Death of Owen Hart. We have one of our favorite books, Under the Mat: Inside Wrestling Greatest Family by Hannah Hart Smith.
Pulitzer Prize.
Amazing, well-researched book. And then we'll read a little bit from Bruce Hart's perspective, Straight from the Heart, published in 2011.
Okay.
And then I had the hardest time, but I did track down a copy of Hitman Bret Hart, My Real Life in the Cartoon World of Wrestling. So there's a couple sources we're going to come through. I did have Mick Foley's book ready, and I had Jim Ross's book as well. Try to get like the boys' perspective.
Yeah.
Jim Ross, we can get those guys out of the way now.
Okay.
Jim Ross kind of just retells the story of what we're going to listen to here shortly, of him making the announcement on air. Let me see if I can find it. Of him making the announcement on air that Owen has died.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty short. The most notable thing, which he says in all of his shoot interviews, that when Owen was taken from the ring, wheeled back on a stretcher, King and I were both numb. Everyone was. The show kept going. Matches happened. The show was a runaway train. King and I were on an island by ourselves. No one was talking. Neither of us knew what was happening. It was all a slow motion blur until about an hour after Owen's fall. I heard a voice of producer in my headset. Kevin Dunn. JR, we're going to come back to you and have you give an update on Owen. I pressed my callback button so I could reply, Kevin, I don't know what the update is. He replied in a calm voice, Owen has died. And we're back in 10, 9, 8. And then he goes on and reads his transcript of what we're going to listen to here in a little bit from Over the Edge 1999. He kind of goes on, after the show, he met with wrestlers backstage and tried to be a shoulder for them to cry on or to yell at. So whatever they needed. And then he went back to his hotel and called his wife, his now late wife, which I believe in this book was released right after she died, I believe, under the black hat.
Oh, okay.
So a lot of it, I haven't finished it all, but I believe there's a lot of references to her in it. Um, he went and he said how glad he was to have her, had somebody a shoulder to cry on or whatever, and he just wanted to go home to her. Mick Foley, kind of the same thing. He talked about how I thought he would have more of an insight on the funeral.
Yeah.
But he did not. He just said that he went there.
Okay.
He was in the middle of writing his first book during the time Over the Edge came out. And that he was backstage somewhere reading it, or writing it. And then Pat Patterson came in, told him that Owen has fell, and he was hysterical. And then he ran and called his family, and Noel didn't understand what he was saying. He kept saying, "Where is he, Daddy?" And Mick would say, "Well, Owen's in heaven now. Owen's in heaven now. He's with the angels." So that's at least all I could really find. These from two people I thought would have some sort of different knowledge. But other than that, we're gonna hear from the Harts, and I think there's no better place to start than with "Broken Hearts" by Martha Hart. Martha, she's kind of become a little bit more well known here in the wrestling fandom, at least for more casual fans, with the Owen Hart Cup in AEW, her being part of that, and the Dark Side of Ring episode, which she had a heavy hand in producing and making sure her story got out. But before we get into that, as we know on Over the Edge, it's not Owen Hart that's fighting the Godfather. It is a character that Owen Hart went by, and that is the Blue Blazer. For those of you that don't know Blue Blazer, he was a character that Owen has done before. Isn't that correct, Logan?
Yeah. So, he was the Blue Blazer, but he first was into wrestling. This is another reason that people do the him and Benoit comparisons, because of course Benoit's Black Pegasus, then you've got him as Blue Blazer, and it was just. He looks like a bird. His capes are on his hands. He can stretch out through like wings. But anyway, come to the Attitude Era. Bret Hart, of course, leaves because the screw job. Owen's the last Hart there. Supposedly he was promised this big push. Didn't happen. He wanted to leave because he didn't like where the Attitude Era was going with nudity, swearing, violence. So then he took this character and he made him like a wholesome, like, drink your milk, take your vitamins kind of person. Which is why we get to this match itself, because he's facing the most vile, a pimp.
Yeah, and I think she, if I remember correctly, it's been a minute since I read this part of her book.
Okay.
I believe she kind of gets into it. I know she did in the Dark Side of the Ring. The reason he went back to the Blue Blazer, like you said, it was more of a comedy gimmick because Vince Russo was writing the show at the time. We should point out.
Yeah.
And they kept coming to him with all these like suggestions. I think one of them, the more famous one that she says, is that they want to do an affair angle where Owen was cheating on Martha with Sable, I believe it was.
Yeah, there's also the one where Deborah was cheating on Jeff Jarrett with Owen.
Yeah, it might have been Deborah. I might have mixed Deborah and Sable up. It might have been Deborah. You're right. But yeah, so he's I guess he was constantly turning stuff like this down, and I know pre-reading some of the other ones we get to, is something that Brett says to one of the family members here, was that he had no choice. You know, he kept turning it down. He was gonna get fired. He can't be turned on everything. He had to go up there. But if I was there, it wouldn't happen. Whatever. Anyway, let's get into it. Let's go through what happened at Over the Edge for those of you that don't know. to my opinion, this is the most complete and detailed recollection of Owen Hart's fall, which comes from obviously his wife.
Okay.
She says, writing this book has been an emotional experience and has forced me to relive the horror surrounding Owen's death on a daily basis. Having spent more than a year and a half painstakingly collecting information about what happened that fateful night in Kansas City, I'm satisfied I can accurately relay the events surrounding his fall. Days after laying him to rest, I even went as far as to stand high atop Kemper Arena on the catwalk from which Owen took his final step. Based on all accounts, reports, and research compiled by my lawyers, myself, police, witnesses, and various other sources, and with the help of periodicals and videos, I have pieced together what I believe happened on the last day of Owen's life. Now, Logan, feel free. I know last time we did one of these podcasts where I read a lot. Feel free to jump in still. I know some haters out there, a couple of them. Did not like.
No, they didn't like my comments.
They don't like the yapper, the peanut gallery over there. But I enjoy it. I tell them, put some respect in Logan's name.
Yeah, put some respect on it.
Put some respect in his fucking name. If you got a problem, it's on fucking site, bro. All right. Don't want a little insider knowledge. I don't know. Anyway. Be serious. This is going to be a serious podcast. We're only 15 minutes in. Already making jokes. Arriving at Kansas City International Airport shortly after 10:30 a.m. on Sunday, May 23rd, Owen was picked up by a fan, Trey Lindstrom, as was the drill whenever the WWF stormed through Missouri. Owen befriended various fans in various cities, while many wrestlers scoffed at the notion of getting involved with their fans on a personal level. You told me before not to misspeak. Because that was a lot of the comments on the last one, too. I think I've already messed up like 3 sentences.
That's okay.
It's all right. Old habits die hard. After checking Owen into his hotel, the two arrived at Kemper Arena at lunchtime on a beautiful sunny day, dubbed Mid-America's premier venue for concerts, sporting events, touring shows, and national conventions. The 19,500-seater facility was located in the heart of Kansas City's stockyards. It was there cattlemen from across the Midwest used to gather at the Kansas City Stock Exchange, building to buy and sell cattle for slaughter. It seemed an appropriate place for the WWF to frequent, given the way Vince McMahon has treated his beefy talent like cattle over the years. As he was overheard saying on numerous occasions, talent can be replaced.
Oh, boy.
I don't think there's an agenda in this book, Logan. What do you think?
Nope.
No, I don't think so. Eating lunch at Kemper 6 hours before showtime, the two were approached by Bobby Talbert, a rigger out of Orlando, Florida, hired by the WWF to coordinate the stunt that would lower Owen into the ring from the rafters. After introducing himself to Owen, Talbert boasted that he was the one who had overseen the exact same stunt several times with Sting, the wrestler from the rival World Championship Wrestling loop. Alluding to the fact Vince McMahon was unhappy with the speed and fumbling that occurred with a somewhat similar drop-in entrance made by Owen in St. Louis 6 months earlier, Talbert said the addition of a quick-release snap shackle would make all the difference in the world. Once he was lowered to the canvas, Owen would simply have to tug lightly on a release cord that would disengage the rappelling line from his harness. Within a split second, he would be free to move around the ring. Having spent the morning rigging up the elaborate setup of racks and rope in the rafters of the arena with 2 city riggers and his assistant Matt Allman, Talbot had allegedly already ran 2 clean tests of the system. The first was done with a 250-pound sandbag, the second with Allman strapped into the harness. It's unclear to this day whether those tests were run with a quick-release snap shackle to be used with Owen or a locking carabiner, which is the industry's safety standard. Either way, Talbot was very lucky, and both descendants were, I think I'm supposed to say lucky, was very lucky, and both These scents were made cleanly and efficiently, while he manually controlled the pressure applied to the nylon repelling rope as it ran through the rescue rack. Everything seemed fine to Talbot, so it was time for a dry run with Owen in the harness. Owen politely declined. "I've done it before, it's no big deal," shrugged Owen, continuing to eat his lunch. Extremely uncomfortable with the vertical drop and the heights involved, Owen simply did not want to subject himself to more terrifying experiences than he absolutely had to. In one of his 2 previous high-level stunts, he told me he almost fell, compounding his fears. He hated every minute of these stunts, whether it was for rehearsal or the real thing. If at all possible, he wanted to limit the number of descents he'd have to endure. Talbot sensed Owen wasn't being cocky about it. He just seemed disinterested in rehearsing. Informed it was a different setup than he had ever used before, Owen was urged again by Talbot to familiarize himself with the equipment. As well, they had never worked together, so it was in everybody's best interest for them to go over everything first. Steve Taylor, the WWF's VP of Event Operations, got involved in the conversation, asking again Owen to try the entrance at least once before showtime. After all, tonight was the night Owen's Blue Blazer character was to win the Intercontinental title over a colorful, pimp-like character named The Godfather. Asked earlier in the week for his jacket measurements and informed him he'd be making an aerial entrance, Owen had been assured by the WWF that top rigging experts from Los Angeles had been hired to ensure the stunt was done safely. Still, it was no secret Owen did not want to do the stunt. He wondered aloud on several occasions why he couldn't just stick to wrestling and the interviews. However, having argued with scriptwriters so often of late over his insistence on being excluded from lurid storylines, he felt he could ill afford to continue butting heads with the WWF brass much longer. Despite his stature on the talent roster, where it was inherent job risk every time you begged off a storyline or stunt, everyone knew it. He didn't want to lose his job, so he said nothing to anyone of consequence. What added to Owen's discomfort, though, were plans to have him descend to the ring with a midget wrestler named Max Mini attached to his harness. As part of the spoof, the midget would be wearing an identical Blue Blazer outfit. Can you imagine that, if they went through with this?
Max Mini.
Yeah.
Ugh. What a
Owen
nostalgia pop.
Owen made it clear that at that point he didn't want anything to do with the added responsibility of a second stuntman dangling from his belt line. "I've got enough to worry about myself getting into the ring and undoing myself," he said. Although the officials had plans to continue with the double drop in, Owen figured at the point the issue has been dropped. He was wrong. Owen's motive for begging out of the rehearsal had much to do with inconvenience as fear. Acutely aware of how incredibly disorganized and rushed rehearsals typically were the day of an event, he did not want to waste time waiting around for people to get their act together. However, feeling pressured to appease the powers that be, he reluctantly agreed to rehearse the aerial entrance at 2 p.m., when he had said he returned from his workout. 2 o'clock came and went, and there was no sign of Owen. Extremely organized and generally quite prompt, Owen simply hoped his deliberate and extended absence would ensure he could opt out of the rehearsal. As time ticked away, several WWF officials began asking around for Owen, anxious to see how the stunt speed would translate on television monitors. As Talbot, Elman, and several others waited around for Owen, unsure whether he might grace them with his presence, the call was made to scrap the evening's plans to include the midget in the stunt. Decided time was getting desperately short and things would be too chaotic to try dropping them both in at the same time. Complicated matters was the fact that Max Mini did not speak English. He required the help of a translator to help explain the particulars of the stunt and the danger involved if he were to pull his release cord too early. Decided that they tried the dual drop the next night in St. Louis.
Oh my. So regardless, it sounds like there's probably going to be a death involving a harness.
Well, especially if this one worked out. But it still wasn't fast enough for the powers that be's liking. Who knows? As Talbot would later say, called an act of God, Owen's deliberate stall tactics wound up saving Max Mini's life.
Good.
Upon Owen's return to the arena at 3:30 p.m., he tried again to pass off rehearsal, saying, "Oh, I'll be all right." It didn't work. Climbing to the rafters mere feet below the 85-foot-high roof, Owen white-knuckled his way along a steel-grated catwalk that was ill-designed for pedestrians. High atop the southwest corner of the ring, he stood on the catwalk with Talbot staring down at the large scoreboard below that he'd soon slide past on his way to the ring. As he assembled his harness, Talbot later claimed to have briefed Owen on the importance of not touching the quick-release cord before landing in the ring. As long as you don't put your hands on this, nothing's going to happen. When you get to the floor, you grab it, give it a deliberate pull upwards so it gives me a visual cue to pull the rope back up. Despite having difficulty in trying to keep his cape from interfering with his arm movement, the test went relatively well. However, upon landing, Owen forgot to pull the release cord, prompting several WWF officials to scream and yell at him as he moved around the ring with the rope still attached to him. Asked if he wanted to try it a second time, the answer was a quick, "No, I got it." Like most wrestling pay-per-views, action in the ring began long before the show was broadcasted to the masses. During one of the preliminary warm-up matches, Vince McMahon was mugged by a group of wrestlers dubbing themselves the Corporate Ministry and led by Vince's son Shane McMahon. You know, one thing I love about these books, I hope we get more of them in the other ones, is like people not directly involved in the business, like explaining things happening in wrestling. Because, you know, like, I know like it has obviously had to have happened, like a non-wrestling fan reading this book at some point. I just like I have that thought in my head of this man getting mugged by a group of wrestlers called the Corporate Ministry. In an effort to prevent him from being a special guest referee later that night, one of the wrestlers smashed a steel chair over Vince's leg. The crowd went wild. To play up the seriousness of the staged injury, the WWF has requested in advance the use of an ambulance and 2 paramedics for a segment showing McMahon being treated and transported out of the arena to the hospital. Records showed the WWF had never before asked the Metropolitan Ambulance Services Trust to attend the Kansas City shows. It simply wasn't necessary, as wrestlers were rarely hurt seriously in the ring. As early matches progressed, Owen sat in the bowels of the arena, changing into his blue blazer singlet and electric blue tights. He laced up his patent blue and white wrestling boots and prepared for his match. Early in the evening, he had picked up a vest to wear for the stunt and angrily hurled it across the dressing room in frustration. Several wrestlers saw this rare display of emotion and discussed with him how much he hated the idea of the stunt. He was worried about the new setup, as well as the fact the cape kept getting in his way. Some tried joking with him to ease his fears, but Owen wasn't responding to it in his typically lighthearted way. He appeared gravely concerned. However, being the consummate professional he was, he hyped himself up for a backstage interview to be aired later in the show. It went well. At 7 p.m., the Over the Edge pay-per-view show opened appropriately with The Undertaker. Featured in an eerie graveyard segment, he promised, "Tonight, darkness will seize the land. Destroy all you hold dear." The death and destruction theme would continue to play through the night. Amidst a show of pyrotechnics, wrestlers Kane and X-Pac entered to the ring to defend their tag team championship belts against Sexual Chocolate and D'Lo Brown. Hey, we got Mark Henry to sign a Sexual Chocolate belt, didn't we?
We actually, we've met all 4 competitors in this match.
And we met the person Owen was supposed to face that night too.
Yeah, a lot of connections. I wonder how many people in this pay-per-view we've met. A lot of PWP connections to Over the Edge.
Well, here's one more. Noticeably quiet as he made final preparations, Owen paced back and forth, prompting longtime colleague Dustin Runnels, a.k.a. Goldust, to ask if he was nervous. Owen admitted before Runnels assured him, "It'll be all right." Thanks, Goldust.
Yeah.
Wonder if he had to take a phone call before he... Yeah. Had to give him that advice.
Yeah.
Owen placed his cape and mask into a duffel bag to help conceal his identity for the walk through the crowd to the rafters. He put on a prison-like coveralls and wore a baseball cap pulled down over his face. Leaving his dressing room with the bag slung over his shoulder, Owen bumped into former wrestler Harley Race.
Wow.
Told by Owen he was very uncomfortable with the upcoming stunt, Race tried to put him at ease by joking, "Be careful that rope doesn't break."
Jesus.
Harley's wife, BJ, offered up a hug to comfort him and asked if he felt better. "The only thing that makes me feel better is your cooking," said Owen. Owen proceeded down the hall to an elevator that took him from the basement of the arena to the main concourse. Walking briskly past hundreds of wrestling fans, he stared towards the ground of the gray brick concourse, hoping to remain anonymous as he headed for section 221. He hurried up several flights of stairs to the last row of the nosebleeds in the building, then he climbed a rickety wooden ladder to the catwalk. The catwalk obviously wasn't designed for heavy traffic. At first, Owen had to negotiate slowly around a floor beam as well as a series of beams overhead. Holding tightly to the railing on either side of the narrow catwalk, he then took a right-hand turn and white-knuckled it 30 feet past a series of light standards that would fully illuminate the building upon his spectacular entrance. His careful steps along the narrow catwalk were further complicated by the dozens of plugs sticking out of electrical sockets, the fact he had his bag in tow, and his size 9.5 wrestling boots. Still, he continued his path towards the center of the arena's roof, careful not to look down at the sea of blue seats and patrons below, whose movement had a dizzying effect on Owen when he had peeked down in his few previous stunts. He made a left turn back towards the center of the arena. Now at the center point of the arena's catwalk system, he turned towards the massive scoreboard that hung well below him. He climbed under an electrical pipe in a slight incline over a structure beam. The final stretch was particularly tough to negotiate due to the more than 100 feet of black nylon repelling rope placed all along the graded floor. It was the same rope Owen would soon attach himself to. It was there, just south of the center of the arena, that he was greeted by Talbot at 7:10 p.m., half an hour before the stunt was to occur. Having said that he worked in the stunt business for 7 years, Talbot was hired by the WWF as an independent contractor to design and set up the riggings for Owen's descent. Described himself as a stunt coordinator and a special rigger for the Universal Studios in Florida, Talbot landed this job, his first with the WWF, based largely on the fact that he told the WWF he had 2 years of experience setting up the stunt for Sting. Given the fact that Owen's stunt was meant to be a parody of WCW's silly entrances, who better to hire than Talbot, who had originally executed the stunt for them? However, we later found out he was merely an assistant to Sting's stunt coordinator. A trusting soul who grew up in a house that never had the doors locked, Owen never questioned Talbot's abilities or qualifications. And why would he? After all, he was working for a billion-dollar company that had assured him the best in the business had been hired to rig him. Despite meeting early in the day for a dry run, Talbot went over the stunt once more while Owen took off his coveralls and baseball cap. The only other men on the catwalk were city riggers James Williams and Jim Vinzant from Local 31 of the Teamsters. Early in the day, they had assembled various span sets and brittles in the arena ceiling as part of the rigging setup laid out by Talbot. During the show, their job was to simply monitor the stunt. Matt Elliman was positioned ringside. The railings and the floor surrounding them had been covered by a black cloth to conceal them as they prepared for the entrance. The second match of the night was a hardcore title fight showdown between Hardcore Holly and Al Snow, who typically
another.
Typically, who enters the ring holding a severed head of a woman featuring the words "Help me" scrawled backwards across her forehead. A prime example of how tasteless and insensitive the WWF have become.
But that, not trying to nitpick because it's not about the story. But even Al Snow says that it's just a random head, and it's supposed to be his psyche like talking to him. It's not like he decapitated a woman.
Hey, this is Martha's telling of what happened, right?
Yeah, that sounds more like a Terry Bollea telling.
I'm surprised. Hogan is a chronic liar.
I'm surprised he hasn't talked about the funeral yet.
I'm surprised he hasn't come up with a lie like that. That he was somehow here in the arena when it happened. He was like, "Oh, brother, I wouldn't do that if I were you." I'm surprised I am honestly surprised he has not said something like that. Well, brother. I told Owen, dude. At least Harley. I feel like that Harley race quote's real. Because how do you make that up? Because if Terry Bollea said that, I would not believe it. I told him, make sure that rope don't break, brother. In these matches, anything goes. Peering down on the action, Owen would have seen the two hammering away on one another with a fire extinguisher, steel chair, a broken table, a metal pan, and a severed head of a deer, which doubles as Snow's imaginary friend Pierre.
Oh, yeah.
Vincent assisted preparations by shining a flashlight on Owen, while Talbot helped him put on the repelling harness, featuring 3 straps across the front and plenty of reinforcement to prevent tearing of any sort. The black harness fit much like a sleeveless life jacket. It also had straps that wrapped around his legs to further stabilize him while being lowered. With Owen securely fastened, Talbot then grabbed the end of a rope and attached the snap shackle device to the metal ring on the back of the harness. He pulled the snap shackle device several times, once almost lifting Owen off his feet to ensure it was properly secured. Owen then put on a silly-looking blue and silver and red mask, featuring holes cut out for his eyes, nose, and mouth. The mask had laces in the back to secure it in place. With his movements somewhat limited in the confined space, Owen needed help from Talbot to put on his bright blue and red sequined cape. The side of the cape, lined with white feathers, were attached to Owen's hands by way of elastic bands he continually readjusted throughout final preparations. The release cord, designed to quickly separate from Owen from the rope upon the ring entry, was then brought to the front of Owen's harness and secured to on the upper right side of his chest using black gaff tape, similar to electrical tape. As designed, one quick tug of the cord would trigger the snap shackle and allow Owen free range in the ring. It only took 6 pounds of pressure to rid himself of the rope, and Talbot explained that Owen should pull it in a deliberate upward fashion, cueing Talbot to pull the rope back up. It was the same cord Owen forgot to pull during rehearsal, drawing the chorus of shouts from frustrated WWF officials, angry at Owen's failure to execute the stunt fluidly. Minutes from his cue, Owen apparently moved his arms out and away from his body several times to reposition the cape in an effort to try to conceal his harness. The aqua cape was heavy and had the tendency to choke him if not positioned correctly. The hardcore slugfest below had finally been won by Al Snow, eliciting a roar from what was said to be a crowd of 18,244 fans. While the event indeed sold out in a one-day capacity for the night, hovering more realistically around the 16,500 mark, based on the size of the wrestlers' elaborate entrance ramp shrouded by metal girders and light stands. As the two exhausting combatants stumbled from the ring, there was a backstage broadcast interview updating fans on the physical condition of Vince McMahon, suggesting he had likely suffered a broken ankle and would be transported to a hospital once an ambulance arrived. In fact, the ambulance was already waiting in the house. Damn, kayfabe here. The lights were then dimmed, the cue for Owen to steady himself for his descent. It was now 40 minutes into the show. Talbot instructed Owen to climb over the 4-foot hand railing and position himself on the outside of the scaffolding. Owen had trouble negotiating the maneuver, so Vincent facilitated things by lifting Owen's cape. The city rigger then retreated to ensure the rope would not get snagged anywhere on the catwalk when Owen was to begin his manual descent. At first facing away from Talbot, Owen turned and held onto the railing, trying not to look down. Talbot checked the tension of the equipment meant by lowering Owen a few feet, at which point the Cape Crusader let go of the railing. Dangling with his shoulders parallel to the catwalk floor, Owen placed his hands on his harness and was ready to be lowered. He hung there for a few minutes. Everything seemed fine to Talbot. Down in the ring, a referee clearing debris from the hardcore match. On the Jumbotron was a 40-second profile of the Blue Blazer. Perhaps somewhat choked by the cumbersome cape, Owen extended his elbows out and away from his body in an effort to make a subtle adjustment. It was then the three riggers were horrified to hear the distinct sound of the snap shackles release. Talbot looked down immediately to see Owen plunging towards the ring, falling backwards in a slight clockwise spiral before landing violently 78 feet below. Several fans heard his scream in terror all the way down. For most of who were glued to the video montage on the Jumbotron, the first they saw the Blue Blazer live that night was a split second before he savagely met the top rope of the wrestling ring, narrowly missing the metal post that supported the turnbuckle in the southwest corner of the ring. Owen's upper left side absorbed the violent impact of his plunge, shattering his left arm just above the elbow, causing him massive internal injuries upon initial contact. Owen was flipped backwards by the highly strung cable, his 229-pound body groomed into the ring, where it sprang a foot off the canvas before settling in the corner. Lying motionless on his back, with his feet pointed toward the center of the ring and his head mere feet from the apron, it took several seconds for his rubbery arms to rest at his side after bouncing off the spring-like canvas. In a wrestling world in which Vince McMahon delights in the thrilling audiences with a shock and element of surprise, the ragdoll figure hurling into the ring drew a loud cheer from the crowd. Unable to grasp the seriousness of the moment, the majority of the fans briefly mistook Owen's horrific fall for a spectacular entrance. Others figured it was perhaps a mannequin. At least that's what they hoped. It quickly became clear something had gone terribly wrong. I think this would be a good time here.
Okay.
Let's go to Over the Edge 1999, and this is what if you order the event on pay-per-view, this is what you would have heard.
More on a different man situation a little bit later. Intercontinental title on the line here. The Godfather to defend against the Blue Blazer. Wink, wink. Yeah, we know it's Owen Hart, but he thinks he's a superhero. And if you don't believe us, just listen to this.
The Blue Blazer is back in the WWF because the WWF needs the Blue Blazer back.
So as we just heard, sometime during this little promo vignette here, Owen has fallen during this time. It's hard to tell exactly when. During, from what I can tell, no one said this, like, after that detail people remember. It'll be obvious here in just a second. That something's quite not right.
Let's take you now to the interview conducted earlier tonight with Kevin Kelly and the Blue Blazer, and we got big problems out here.
Well, Blue Blazer, you got a big match tonight.
We got big problems out here.
I don't think I ever caught that when I used to watch this.
Just saying his name makes my blue blood boil. Ooh, the Godfather, my arch nemesis. He represents everything that's wrong with the WWF. But fear not, because I, the Blue Blazer, will always triumph over evildoers. And you know why? Because I always take my vitamins, say my prayers, and drink my milk. Woo!
Ladies and and gentlemen, when you're doing live television, a lot of things can happen, and sometimes they are not good. The Blue Blazer, as we know, as Owen Hart, was going to make a very spectacular superhero-like entrance from the rafters, and something went terribly wrong here. Certainly, Owen Hart, Blue Blazer, very serious situation here at this point in time is being attended to by the EMTs. This is not a part of the entertainment here tonight. This is as real can be here. And the EMTs are tending to Owen in the ring now. And we are at a little bit of a loss for this situation. I've been doing this for more years than I would like to admit. And this is it's one of the most shocking things I've ever seen. This is not your typical wrestling storyline. This is a real situation. Owen Hart was to ascend in a superhero-like entrance from the ceiling of this arena, and something terribly, terribly went wrong. I don't know if the harness broke or what the malfunction was, and we are going to keep our cameras on this crowd at this point.
Yeah, as a fan, if you're watching this isn't like something's obviously wrong here.
Ladies and gentlemen, as best we can.
Because they're just showing live views of the crowd here.
Yeah.
And that's obviously, as you know, like as he's saying, oh my God, I just now realized this. That they just, in the video, they're showing a video package for the next match. Somebody was just doing CPR on Val Venus.
Yep.
Probably as actual CPR was being applied to Owen Hart. But here, let's get back to Jim Ross here.
Out of your puppy.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, again, Owen Hart was scheduled to descend from the top here, the Kemper Arena, in a superhero-like entrance in his Blue Blazer character. Something has gone terribly wrong with the equipment that Owen Hart was being lowered down to the ring, and the paramedics are working on Owen Hart. Let me tell you, we are going to have and we've already had some entertaining things. This is not a part of the show. I don't know any better way to put it. This is not a wrestling angle. This is real life. Owen Hart, with the equipment malfunctioning, is being attended to right now by a host of EMTs. We are not going to put this on television. It is not a sensationalistic attempt to leave a mark here on this event. It was, again, we don't know exactly what malfunctioned. Obviously something in the apparatus, we assume, and that's all we're doing is assuming that went wrong, unless Owen inadvertently released himself before he was near the ring. So again, we will have our mixed tag team matchup. We will have the rest of this broadcast. But the bigger issue now is that a human being, Owen Hart, has been terribly injured here on this live broadcast. So we will, again, there's been so many things that have happened here, but right now nothing is more important than the health and the welfare of not only a great athlete, but a very unique and a good human being who is now being attended to in the ring. And again, I can only reiterate the best way that I know how, and if I'm not being as articulate as I would like to be, I hope that you can understand that this was not, I repeat, this was not a wrestling angle. This was not part of the storyline. This was a terribly, terribly tragic situation, and the EMTs now are giving Owen Hart external heart massage. There are several folks are there to attend to him, and Jerry Lawler back joining me here. King, I was just reiterating to the fans, this is not a part of the show. We're here to entertain and have fun, but this is neither.
No, it doesn't look good at all.
So again, Owen is being attended to. He is now leaving the ring. We are not going to sensationalize this event by taping it. by showing you what's going on, and Owen Hart getting a tremendous ovation here as he is being carried from the ring. And thank God that the EMTs who are already here tonight standing by, that they were here and able to get here so quickly. And folks, again, there's so many things going on. We will keep you updated on this situation. And our mixed tag team match, by the way, is coming up next. We will tell you that. And Kevin Kelly, we do understand, is standing by. Let's take you now.
So that's the action as it unfolded. From the fall to him being escorted out of the arena, probably about 10 minutes.
Yeah, and Jeff Jarrett, who at the time was probably his best road friend, they were tag team champions at one point. He was doing a backstage promo for that upcoming mixed tag match that they kept saying when Owen got wheeled by. So, it's when they say the show continued, the show went on. There was no stops. There was that 10-minute of Jim Ross talking, but that was about it. And that 10 minutes probably would have happened if this had happened before and Vince knew exactly how to pivot. But since this was new, they needed Jim to stall.
He did a very good job, too, by the way. A horrible position to be in, for sure.
Yes.
We're going to skip ahead in just a little bit. Because I almost call her Diana. That would have been a horrible mistake on my part. We'll skip ahead just a little bit here. But before, I have to renew the book real quick. So for some reason, you rent these books, you can only get it for an hour. Like, who can read a book in an hour?
Not us.
not I. So we're going to get back in here. Owen's limp body was then pulled under the ropes and placed onto a cot, prompting a loud cheer from the stunned audience. Cowdery immediately jumped aboard the gurney. That's one of the ringside doctors or physicians that was there. Straddled Owen and continued chest compressions while being wheeled along the ramp. As a growing number of emergency personnel escorted him out of the arena, chants of Owen filled in the air. By this time, 8 minutes had elapsed since Owen's fall, and there were no signs of medical progress. Owen's lips had turned blue, and his body was depleted of oxygen. Time was getting desperately short. Excuse me. As the entourage of the medical personnel wheeled Owen from the ring, Cowdery heard one disgusted fan yell, "This is fucking fake!"
Yeah.
Many others, however, had tears in their eyes and offered words of encouragement for their fallen hero. Wow. Meanwhile, pay-per-view coverage returned to the massive stadium screens as Deborah and Owen's tag team partner Jeff Jarrett struggled to hold back tears during a live backstage promo aimed at hyping their upcoming match. Wheeled out of the arena to the building's south loading dock, Owen and the rescue workers breezed by a group of teary-eyed wrestlers who had been watching the scene backstage, consoling one another. Several wrestlers, including The Rock and Dwayne Johnson, desperately wanted to rush the ring to try to help Owen. They were ordered to remain behind the entrance curtains for fear their emergence would have sent the crowd into a frenzy and might have led to many to believe the fall was a part of the show. Several wrestlers offered their own words of encouragement for their wounded warrior. Owen was taken to the waiting ambulance. His emotional wrestling colleagues mobbed the area where the ambulance had been parked. Coleman and crew hauled Owen past the horde and climbed into the ambulance with Cowdery, who continued his CPR efforts while dripping with sweat. Oh, I skipped this part. There was a WF doctor that kept getting in the way of the actual paramedic doctors.
Really?
Yeah, it's he tried using a heart defibrillator on Owen and some all this other shit. Apparently. So this is why she says the alleged WWF doctor continued to get in the way by somehow gaining entrance to the vehicle. After bellowing ridiculously inappropriate instructions to watch his arm, the stranger was finally removed by Underhill, demanding he be allowed to stay because he was a doctor. Underhill asked him if he'd sign a doctor intervention form. When he refused, he was pulled from the ambulance and the back doors were closed to keep wrestlers out and allow medics to continue their work unimpeded. It was also done to prevent further videotaping of the incident by a roving WWF cameraman intent on capturing the ugly scene on film. When I was listening to the Labs fan cover this, they made an interesting comment, which I'll offer up to you to see if you agree with it. That if somehow Owen survives this, do you think they air the footage of this?
Oh, 100%.
Oh, Owen, they would, yeah. It'd be.
It would be in the "Don't try this at home" videos before the pay-per-views.
You know they would too. Coleman and Cowdery continued trying to get solid CPR established and force oxygen into Owen's system. Owen and his cot were secured. A cervical collar was placed on him, and he was hooked up to a monitor. It was then Coleman established Owen still had electrical activity in his heart, but his heart wasn't actually beating. It was deemed an agonal, or a dying heart rhythm, meaning he had yet to flatline. A shot of atropine was administered in an effort to raise his heart rate. It had no response. Owen's eyes remained fixed and dilated. Says the ambulance had been hired to act as a standby for Vince's fake injury. Company policy for the emergency providers incorporated dictated that the paramedics wait for another ambulance to transport Owen to the hospital.
Oh my God.
The first ambulance was supposed to stay for the duration of the hire. However, as precious time ticked away, several distraught wrestlers began demanding that Owen be transported immediately. At one point, The Rock leaned into the driver's side of the cab and began yelling, "Who's driving this motherfucker?" At the same time, another wrestler jumped into the passenger side. Underhill tried explaining to The Rock that they had to wait for another ambulance and that Owen was being stabilized for transport. This statement was met with increased anger. Underhill, who at this point also told the unidentified grappler to leave the ambulance immediately. He complied. At this point, Underhill and Coleman agreed the mob surrounding the ambulance had grown too hostile and too emotional. Things were getting out of hand, with no one attempting to control the emotional group clustered around the vehicle, provide too much of a distraction for the ambulance attendants to fully focus on Owen. A judgment call was made to leave the building. En route to the Truman Medical Center, just 3 miles away, epinephrine? That sounds right?
Yeah,
epinephrine?
I'm no doctor.
Yeah. Was administered into Owen's airway tube. He was also hooked up to an IV seconds before he was taken out of the ambulance at Truman. In Coleman's opinion, however, Owen was already clinically dead. When any fall greater than 20 feet occurs in the Kansas City area, there's an automatic activation of the hospital's trauma team, which consists of 4 top doctors. They quickly assembled for Owen's arrival, and the CAT scan technician was also put on alert. It had now been slightly more than 20 minutes since his fall. With Owen's arrival at 7:59 p.m., the team headed up by Dr. Michael Rush wheeled him into the trauma room for a final desperate attempt to save his life. However, they were all aware of Owen's grave condition via radio transmission. His Glasgow Coma Scale, a measure of neurological function, was listed as a 3 out of 15. It obviously wasn't looking good. Two units of O-negative blood were at the ready for a possible transfusion. Nurse Michael Tucker was brought up to date on the situation by paramedics as Owen was wheeled through the emergency entrance doors and into Truman Medical Center. After transferring Owen's body from the ambulance cot to the bed in the Trauma Room 1, several attendants had problems removing Owen's vest. With the help from Tucker, who had cut the shoulder strap and several belts off the garment. It was removed. The laces on his boots were also cut right up the middle. Electrocardiogram pads were immediately placed on Owen's chest in search for any recordable heart rhythm. The initial reading from the cardiac monitor indicated he was asystole, meaning he had no sign of heart activity whatsoever. However, seconds later there were signs of a light PEA, pulseless electrical activity. It meant that the heart was not beating, but faint electrical activity was still apparent. He was still fighting for his life. This offered a brief moment of hope. As dire as the situation was, reviving patients from PEA to a shockable rhythm wasn't beyond the realm of possibility. Both Tucker and Rush had seen it happen before. At this point, all those who transported Owen to the hospital, except Cowdrey, have left the room. He stood in the doorway, sadly anticipating what was to come. Nurses began calling out observations to Tucker, who recorded the findings. Owen's skin was blue, his lips were colorless, and his skin was cold to the touch. Nurses reported he had no bowel sounds and his abdomen was soft. One aide noted there was no sign of alcohol in his breath, which was listed as bilateral and equal, maintained only by the tireless CPR efforts. Owen's eyes remained open and fixed ahead, revealing no sign of life whatsoever. That his pupils dilated to 5 millimeters, nearly twice as normal, was yet another ominous sign. Owen had an open fracture above his left elbow and cut below. These wounds were a little concern. A large bruise on his left lateral chest was further proof his heart had quite literally suffered from irreversible damage. While fears escalated that he had by now suffered brain damage, the only thing that mattered was that he regained consciousness. 4 minutes later, in an effort to stimulate his heart, a 16-gauge IV catheter inserted earlier in his left arm by paramedics was used to feed Owen's unresponsive body with epinephrine. It immediately blew the vein. A minute later, another amp of epinephrine was administered through an endotracheal tube. Then at 8:06 p.m., a large IV was placed in the right groin to prompt more epinephrine and atropine. Still, monitors recorded no signs of progress, no pulse. His heart continued to show slight electrical activity, but nothing of significance. Very little hope remained as the precious minutes ticked away. Outside in the waiting room, retired wrestler Harley Race paced anxiously, awaiting word of his longtime pal. He would later be joined by Jeff Jarrett, still in full wrestling gear, as a host of concerned wrestlers who number close to 24 by night's end. At 8:07, a final amp of epinephrine and atropine went into Owen's right femoral line. 4 minutes later, he was still unresponsive. CPR continued for a final few minutes until doctors determined all resuscitation efforts were futile. 13 minutes after arriving at the hospital, 33 minutes since the fall, all work on Owen had stopped. At 8:12 p.m. Central Standard Time, the supervising doctor called code. At age 34, my Owen was dead. Eye drops were placed in Owen's eyes by Tucker for purposes of possible donation. Unfortunately, the request for organ donation was never made, as I certainly would have consented as per Owen's wishes. His belongings were collected by Detective Cowdrey for the criminal investigation that began immediately. The medical examiner was called, the doctors were interviewed by police, and detectives were dispatched to Kemper to secure the scene in an effort to piece together what went wrong. Wearing nothing but a pair of white socks, Owen's naked and lifeless body was covered with a white sheet. Meanwhile, the show went on.
Here in Kansas City, tragedy befell the World Wrestling Federation and all of us. Owen Hart was set to make an entrance from the ceiling, and he fell from the ceiling. And I have the unfortunate responsibility to let everyone know that Owen Hart has died. Owen Hart has tragically died from that accident here tonight.
So the show goes on. I know it's it's been a conversation that wrestling fans have had for a long time.
Right.
Should the show have gone on? I believe we'll probably get to it here in a little bit too. Vince's reaction. He makes the case that the fans would have rioted or something.
Yeah.
Which
Yep.
I don't know if I believe. So let's go to let's take a quick detour away from Martha. Let's head over to Diana.
Okay.
What was Diana doing when they found out the news? Chapter 34, Owen's Fall. I was watching the WF May pay-per-view, Over the Edge. By eerie coincidence, I was in our living room with Harry and Georgia. Davey was out on a steroid run with Ben Bassarab? Bass Arab? I don't know who that is. Had to throw the shot at Davey, I guess. I was glued to the set, knowing Davey would be joining soon. I wanted to brush up on all the storylines and find out who was doing what with whom. Owen had just done his interview as the Blue Blazer. We laughed as we reminded the kids to drink their milk and say their prayers as they ran off. And then ran off. I went upstairs for a moment and the phone rang. I picked it up. It was a reporter from Off the Record, a popular television sports show on the Sports Network. He asked me if I had just seen something happen to Owen on TV. I said, no. He said, so you didn't see him fall? What do you mean, just now? We're praying for him, he answered. I need to go. I hung up and rushed toward the stairway. Harry met me on the stairs and hugged me. He said, something has happened to Owen. The television showed a darkened arena. The camera was on a wide shot locked to the ring. Locked on... They weren't locked in the ring. I don't know why she said that. The commentators Jim Ross and Jerry Lawler kept repeating over and over again that this was for real. They said there was a freak accident and the emergency personnel were working on Owen and that everyone was praying for him. I called my dad, whose phone had been ringing off the hook. He said he'd been contacted and was waiting for an update. For it seemed like an eternity, we held our breath. Ellie came through the door. Then my dad called. We've lost Owen. I'm sorry, Dad, I said. Ellie heard me say this and started running on the spot, screaming and crying. No, not Owen. Poor Mom and Dad. My dad was really brave about it. His voice never quivers or cracks. He's such a complete man. He has to hold everything together for his family. So that's what he did. My dad called me first because he knew what kind of relationship I had with Owen. We were always so close. We were the babies of the family. After I hung up the phone, I cried and cried. I sank to the floor and wept. Finally, I managed the strength to call Davey. I said, Owen's gone. They say he's dead. Davey said, no, that's impossible. So that's where they were. She goes into the funeral here. But what about Brett?
Yeah. What about friend of the show, Bret Hart?
Let's see. Where was Brett? He had on May 17th, I did a bit where I came out of the crowd on the Tonight Show to accept a challenge from Kevin Nash. That I came back to WCW in 1 week to wrestle him. Jay Leno had been part of WCW's Hog Wild pay-per-view back in July of '98, and he laughed when I pulled out a WCW wrestling card with his picture on it and asked him to sign it. Meanwhile, the Hitman had won the WHL Championship and were set to meet in the Ottawa 67s in the Memorial Cup. For those of you that don't know, that's Bret Hart's hockey team. He's a part owner. They call it the Hitman.
Yes. Yep.
They have really cool jerseys. I'll say that. Things had improved so much between Julie and me that I invited her, along with Blade and Dallas, to fly east with me to watch the game. On Sunday afternoon, May 23rd, 1999, the Ottawa 67s defeated the Hitmen in a heartbreaking overtime. Julie and I, along with the boys, stopped in the locker room to congratulate the team on a great season. Even though the team had lost, that visit was a sweet moment of competitive purity that only one finds in real sports.
Yeah.
Had a rush to take
Real wrestling.
Had a rush to take my flight to LA for my second live appearance on The Tonight Show the next day. Saying goodbye to Julie and the kids at the airport, we bumped into some of the mothers of the Hitmen players who were catching a flight back to Calgary. They were still tearful, and then one of them cracked a tentative smile and said, "Why are we crying? It's not like somebody died."
Oh, my God.
I connected to my LA flight through Toronto, but had no time at the airport to call home. I pictured the whole Hart clan sitting in Stu's kitchen, watching the nationally televised Memorial Cup final and feeling the same passion and heartache as me. A couple hours later, in the air, something ominous nagged at my heart. It couldn't be the game. I knew all about the game. Then the cockpit door opened, and the pilot came out. I just knew that he was looking for me. He handed me a note that read, "Bret Hart, please call home. Family emergency." I tried every phone in the first-class cabin, but as luck would have it, the only one that worked was next to the only other passenger in the compartment. At first, I got nothing but busy signals, so I checked my voicemail to find a frantic message from Carlo asking me to call him right away. I knew at that moment that someone had died. When I reached him, Carlo kept asking, "Are you sitting down?" "I'm on a plane. Of course I'm sitting. What happened?" "Don't be alarmed. Don't get mad. I don't know how to tell you this. Are you sitting down?" I was getting annoyed. "Just spit it out." "Owen's dead. He got killed doing some kind of stunt in the ring." I felt my chest caved in. Carlo didn't have any of the facts yet. All he knew for sure was that Owen was gone. Logan, do you want to hear from Bruce Hart?
Yeah, let's hear from Bruce.
Well, yeah, give me a second. I gotta go borrow his book from the library here.
Okay.
And I gotta find it. I thought I saved the page. Apparently not.
If you don't have one, get and use a library card.
Yeah, this is very good. Very good card to
Free,
have.
and libraries can get you books, video games, CDs.
This podcast is brought to you by your local library.
Yeah.
So Bruce Hart, he wrote a book in 2011. Chapter 61, Owen. God. What does Bruce Hart have to write about for 61 chapters?
A lot. He's the Hart brother that... So, the Bret and Owen feud was rumored to supposed to have been Bret and Bruce. But then Bret spoke up and said it should be Owen.
Well, that's probably a good idea.
Oh, 100%.
No offense, Bruce. No offense. So Chapter 61, Owen. The big item on the agenda for most people in our family on May 23rd, 1999 was the final Memorial Cup tournament for the National Junior Hockey Supremacy between the Ottawa 67s and the Calgary Hitmen, of which my brother Bret was part owner. The game was a thriller even before the Hitmen lost in overtime. It was a downer, but couldn't even compare to what has transpired later in the day. After the game, we headed up to my parents' place for Sunday dinner, a weekly ritual amongst most in the family. The meal that evening was my mother's spaghetti. Knees weak, arms are heavy. Vomit on Stu's sweater already. Which was my family favorite. After our usual meet and greet, we were sitting down eating in the dining room when the phone rang. Someone, I think it was my sister Allison, went back into the kitchen to answer it. A few seconds later, I heard an ear-piercing shriek, and she staggered back into the dining room, ashen-faced, and gasped, "Owen's dead." When we pressed her for details, she said she didn't have any, other than he'd been injured from a fall and pronounced dead in the ring at a show in Kansas City. As you can imagine, the scene at the dinner table was suddenly completely insane. With everyone trying to wrap their heads around what had happened, I was sitting beside my mother at the far end of the table, and she was weeping inconsolably, while at the other end of the table, my dad was just staring ahead, impassively. For some reason, perhaps, it was wishful thinking. I could tell myself it must have been a work. Some kind of contrived fake death scene, which the WF has, on occasion, pulled. Did they, though? Has the WF ever done a fake death angle besides Vince in 07? Not that I can think of on the top of my head. That would be...
Not a, true death angle. I mean, maybe she's referencing any buried alive matches up to that point, but that's a stretch. Or a casket match. I mean, the Undertaker died that one time, but he came back.
Well, okay, and the hanged Boss Man.
Yes.
Before this too, so I guess he has somewhat of a point. But if you think a buried alive match, if somebody actually dying, they have to be your actual moron. Anyway. As I surveyed everyone at the table crying, though, I was half pissed that they hadn't at least chosen to let us know beforehand. The first time it began to dawn on me that it might not be a work and that he was dead was when Tammy Christopher, the sports reporter from the CFCN television and the family friend, showed up at the house, teary-eyed, and confirmed that it was no work. My initial reaction was of sadness and disbelief, but after having been appraised of how he had been killed on some silly entrance stunt from the ceiling of the arena, I was livid. At my dad's behest, we headed over to Owen's house, which was only about 5 minutes away, to offer our condolences and to what we could to comfort his wife Martha. As you can imagine, she was beside herself with sorrow. But we endeavored to extend our sympathy. She was extremely cold. She made a point of telling my parents how much she always hated the wrestling business and that Owen had never really wanted to be in it either, but had been pushed into it and that he had been looking forward to getting out of it. I didn't think that was called for. Everyone has their own way of grieving, I suppose, but I didn't hear Dale Earnhardt's widow condemning NASCAR after his fatal accident at Daytona because she knew he had died doing something he loved doing. Having been the one who brought Owen into wrestling, I can attest that he genuinely loved the wrestling business. In fact, there's no way he could have been as good as he was without having had a lot of passion. Any conjecture to the contrary is horseshit, as far as I'm concerned. I didn't care for the way Martha treated my parents, almost as if she'd been the only one who suffered any loss. We all kept our mouths shut and left shortly thereafter. When we got back to my dad's, the phone rang and I answered it. It was Carl DeMarco, the supposed president of the WWF. He launched into the scripted-sounding spiel that almost sounded like he was reading it. This is Carl DeMarco, the president of the World Wrestling Federation. And on behalf of the World Wrestling Federation, I'd like to extend our sincerest condolences to the Hart family on the untimely passing of their son, the Blue Blazer, Owen Hart. I angrily cut him off and snarled, "This man should have the fucking stones to call himself, and I have some fucking figurehead flunky called to cut a fucking promo." After I hung up, I felt kind of bad. The old "don't shoot the messenger," but I had meant what I said. Later that evening, at about 2 a.m, the phone rang again. Since my parents had finally gone to bed after a long, devastating day, I didn't want them awakened, so I answered it downstairs. It was Vince McMahon himself. In the past, whenever I'd spoken to him, he had usually been pretty aloof and imperious, but this time around, he was quite understated, almost subdued. Which is surprising given the circumstances. I've been told that Vince doesn't drink, but he sounded like he may have had a few stiff ones before he made the call. I knew that I probably would have. He mumbled in a half-whisper that he was sorry that what happened to Owen. I was in the process of telling him that Owen should have never been made to do some silly non-wrestling stunt like that in the first place, and that wrestlers should be allowed to be wrestlers, not have to be stuntmen, trapeze artists, or circus clowns. Vince quite honestly sounded as if he was in the trance. He just kept repeating how sorry he was, when all of a sudden I heard a click on the phone. At first I figured my dad might have picked up the extension upstairs, but I immediately heard this female voice, which I recognized my sister Allison's, launching into a visceral rant, berating Vince for having killed Owen. I thought her tirade was uncalled for, but I damn well know how bad I would have felt if the tables would turn and say Shane McMahon had been killed in an accident while wrestling for Stampede. I found myself in the unlikely position of having to act as peacekeeper. I kept trying to tone things down. Thankfully, Allison ran out of steam and finally just hung up, after which I endeavored to offer apologies for her outburst. Vince was pretty understanding about the whole thing, though, and we hung up at that point. Let me see. We can go back to her book. So this is probably we're gonna read this portion, and then we'll end it with Vince McMahon's press conference, and then a little bit of a news spot. Then I think we'll call it for part 1. I know it's getting kind of late, and Logan has his big boy job to do in the morning.
Yes, I do.
And to be honest, I feel like we're only about halfway through.
Yeah, there's a lot of info for this. It was a big event in time, but in like I said, in the wrestling scope, it's kind of a blip. Like it's not you don't realize how much is involved with this. For most casual wrestling fans, they know the tragic accident, his passing, that there's some Hart members that side with Martha, there's some that side with WWE, and that's about it.
So we heard from Bruce Hart about them going to console Martha. So let's see how Martha remembers this evening to close it out here for part 1 of Over the Edge 1999, 25 years later, with chapter 7 called The Call. In preparation for the move, they bought a brand new house, by the way, like their dream house.
Oh,
very shortly before this, like they're in the middle of moving from one house to the other. I spent the day dismantling the home we'd happily lived in for almost 10 years. It had been a long day of packing, and I had been plagued by a looming, inexplicable sadness. Owen traveled so much that loneliness was no stranger to me. This feeling was different, though. There was a puzzling emptiness and despair that suddenly intruded on a very happy time in my life. It gnawed at me all day long. Owen's routine, no matter where he was, often included frequent calls home to see how we were all doing. On this strange day, I longed to hear his voice. Only he could pick up my spirits with a simple hello. It was the Sunday of a long weekend. So many of the families on the block were enjoying the beautiful sunshine and the company of loved ones. The kids were outside playing with the neighbors, 2 daughters, and seemed content to do their own thing. Owen was gone most weekends, so we had our family time when we could. It seemed like we were never on the same cycle as the rest of the world. But even though our setup was a little bit out of the ordinary, we weren't. The only thing that made us different from any other normal family was the fact that Owen traveled a great deal. We looked forward to a day that would all change, but for now, we did well to maintain a regular routine of sorts. As I stood and cleaned and filled my mind with thoughts of what our lives were going to be like after we moved, I looked forward to our big yard, as I love gardening. I thought about the front porch swing Owen had painted just before he left, a picture of us sitting on it on cool summer nights with a blanket and a hot cup of tea. It would all be so wonderful. I saw with my mind's eye how I was going to decorate the house. I would make it such a haven. The kitchen would always be filled with the aroma of fresh baked goodies, and I thought some interesting recipes that would surprise Owen and the kids. I loved to please all of them any way I could. After all, my life revolved around my 3 bright stars. Yet though all these thoughts, my mind continually drifted back to this darkness that was lurking. There seemed to be no escaping this awful feeling. By mid-afternoon, I could take the nagging sensation no longer. To ease my troubled mind, I stopped packing and called my sister Virginia. Virginia and I walked the line together all our lives, growing up in difficult circumstances with only each other to lean on. No matter what the situation, we rallied behind one another. I rang her and was grateful she answered. After several minutes of idle chit-chat, she asked, "What's wrong?" I told her I wasn't sure, but I just felt awful and wanted Owen to call. She told me I was feeling jittery because we were just taking a big step. Our new house meant a new life in a lot of ways. Financially, we'd be more strapped, and because the house was bigger, there'd be more upkeep. We had also decided to have a new baby, another responsibility to add to the list. I had been enrolled at the University of Calgary for 3 years now, and desperately wanted to finish my psychology degree while also juggling motherhood with my part-time jobs at the post office and the pool. All these issues weighed on my mind. I also knew that while I loved my family life, I had dreams of my own that I wanted to realize. I tried to do things I wanted without stepping on anyone's toes, but was aware of all the added duties would rest largely on my shoulders since Owen would continue to travel frequently for at least the next few years. Virginia suggested I tried contacting Owen, so I grabbed his booking sheet, which listed his destinations. In some cities like Chicago and LA, he always had the same accommodation arrangements. If he had been in one of those cities, I might have been able to contact him. However, seeing as he was in Kansas City, Missouri, I had no idea which hotels to check. I ended my conversation with Virginia repeating, "I just wish so badly that Owen would phone me." An hour later, the kids were restless and begging to go out somewhere. I decided to take them out for a few errands. Owen suggested I go to the hardware store to buy 2 industrial garbage pails with wheels. He figured I would need the wheels because they were going to be living on acreage with a long driveway. I laughed to myself at his backhanded form of thoughtfulness. Off I went, kids in tow, to the hardware store. I made a few other runs, then stopping at the park to give Oj and Athena some quality time with me. Still thinking ahead to our nightly call, I couldn't wait for him to charge me up with encouragement that I so sorely needed. I returned home with the kids, the pails, and the hollow feeling I left with. Just as I started the kids' dinner, the phone rang. The call displayed indicated the call was out of area, which was known around else as Owen abroad. Thank God I grabbed it after the first ring with great excitement. "Martha," said the deep voice, followed by my cheery hello. "Owen," I gasped. "This isn't Owen. This is Vince McMahon." I was so sure it was Owen's voice, I would bet my life on it. Owen was such a joker, I thought for a second he was playing some sort of trick on me. "Vince McMahon," I replied hesitantly. "Why are you calling me?" Still unconvinced it was Vince, his response rattled me. "Owen has fallen from above the ring and he's hurt." With my suspicious it was Owen pulling a crank call, I quickly grew perturbed. Is that right? How do you pronounce that? Perturbed? It wasn't unusual for Owen to get under your skin with a prank, but they're generally harmless ones. "Is this a serious call? Because I don't appreciate being upset for nothing," I said. "Yes, this is a very serious call," was the response. At that point, I realized it really was Vince. I became moderately alarmed, but still completely convinced. Wasn't completely convinced. "Is there really a serious call? Or is this part of your production?" Vince was doing such ridiculous things in the world of wrestling, I thought it might have been some gimmick to get a reaction. He seemed a bit stunned by my demeanor. "No, it's not." A pensive sullenness was taking shape between us, since this truly was a legitimate call, but now we were talking about my husband's well-being. Suddenly, I became deeply worried. I could feel goosebumps tingle over my body. Is he conscious?" I asked. When his answer was a quick no, my heart sank. Panic ensued, and I peppered him with rapid-fire questions. How far did he fall? Did he break anything? How is he now? Who's taking care of him? Over and over, repeated his simple response. "I don't know." There was a moment of silence. I thought he was acting particularly nervous and evasive. "I know how much you and Owen meant to each other," said McMahon. This sent me to an hysteria. I begged him to tell me this was some sort of sick joke. "Were you watching the show?" he asked. I had no idea what he was talking about. What show? It was so early in the evening, it had slipped my mind that Owen was wrestling in a late afternoon pay-per-view that day. Right after I told him I wasn't, he offered up more chilling information. The paramedics worked on him and he took him to the hospital. I snapped, paramedics? Are these real qualified paramedics? Or the uncertified quack doctors that you have sit at ringside? No, they are real. We had real paramedics on hand today, said McMahon. They cared for Owen and took him to the hospital. When asked what hospital, he reverted once again, I don't know. Annoyed with my head swimming, I told him I needed to talk to someone who had some answers. Someone will call you soon, he said sheepishly to end the call. That was it. No goodbyes. We both just hung up. I began pacing around the house. I looked out the window to check on the kids who were still happily playing with the neighbor's daughters. I didn't know what to do with myself. The doom plagued me all day. It was engulfing me. I felt like I was drowning. It was hard to breathe. Were one of my worst fears going to be realized? Ever since we had laid down the groundwork for our new dream home, I had this impinging fear that something dreadful was going to happen. Owen shared this mild fear with me. We were both afraid tragedy might strike because our lives were too good to be true. We were too content, too happy together. I knew something inside me was going to give, so I quickly called my mother. I didn't want to tie up the line, so I briefly explained something dreadful had happened to Owen and that I would need her to come right away to look after the children. I figured I might have to jump on a plane. I really didn't have any details, just a feeling that everything was going to break loose shortly. I called the Hart house too, but they knew nothing, so I hung up. I waited anxiously for an update. It seemed though I was left suspended for a long time. Mercifully, the phone rang minutes later, and I had lunch for it. It was only Stu calling back. I explained I had no new information and I had to get off the phone. I only had one line. I didn't want to tie it up. I told him I'd call him as soon as I heard something. Anything. Again, I waited in an agitated, disturbed state, gazing around my sitting room. I noticed all of our beautiful family Christmas pictures that still hung on the walls. Why hadn't I taken them down yet? As part of the move, I had taken everything else down. Once again, the phone rang. Looking at the call display, I saw it was from out of area. Inundated with mixed emotions, I answered. It was the doctor from the hospital where Owen was being treated. He identified himself and asked if I was alone. He started describing the particulars of the incident, explaining the fall Owen had and the severity of his injuries he had sustained. Overwhelmed with anticipation, I interrupted him. Doctor, please just tell me the end result. I said, convinced I could deal with any injury at all, as long as my Owen was still alive. Normally you should be flown down here to receive such news, he began. I am so sorry. I did everything I could to save him, but his injuries were fatal. There's nothing more I could do. Your husband has died. With tears bursting out my eyes, I doubled over and screamed out loud, No, no, no. Please, please, oh God, no. Waiting patiently for me to catch my breath, he reiterated how sorry he was. Would you like to speak to Harley Race? He asked. He is one of the wrestlers that accompanied your husband to the hospital. Through my tears, I said, No, I don't even know him. I hung up, sat back, and melted into my chair. Oh my God, I couldn't believe it. A million thoughts raced through my mind. A battle was being waged inside my head. One side of my brain said, no, this didn't happen. It couldn't happen. It's not true. The other side of my brain was saying, it must be true. Who would be so cruel to tell you such a grave lie? Devastated, I stared at the ceiling of my dismantled room. What just happened? The reality of all slowly sinking in, and it felt like the weight of 1,000 ships heaped on top of my chest. I could barely breathe. I felt all at once sick, nauseous. My head hurt, the walls were closing in, the room was spinning. I was going to throw up. With my hand on my heart, I thought I was going to collapse right there in my living room. I quickly called my mother back, saying simply, he died. Minutes later, an eerie calm consoled me for a brief moment. I was in the eye of the storm. It was a moment of truth. I could see clearer than I ever had before. I saw before me two distinct paths, one of destruction and one of construction. I knew exactly what my situation was. Which road would I take? Would I choose to live for those that love me or lie down in a whirlpool of defeat? The unknown was ahead, and I left to navigate through the dense fog alone. Either way, all I could do was batten down the hatches and wait for devastation to hit. Let's see. I felt obligated to inform Owen's parents. They should hear it from me, I thought. But how would I tell them? When could I get my own head around it? I dialed each digit with great trepidation, unsure of what I should say. Helen answered. Helen, I am so sorry to have to tell you, your son has died. Somewhat prepared for the news, thanks to my frantic call minutes earlier, she nevertheless pleaded sorrowfully. No, not Owen. He can't be gone. Shocked at having to confirm something I had yet to fully believe, I reiterated that he was indeed dead. She let out a horrific scream as the receiver dropped to the floor. I could hear her bellowing, Owen is dead. Owen is dead. She must have been running because her voice grew fainter and fainter. I listened until there was silence. Nobody returned to pick up the phone. A numbness swept over me. The waves were starting to crash. Owen's death was going to wreck everyone's foundation to the core. Someone was pounding on my front door. Logically, I thought it must have been Oja or Athena. Oh my God, I had forgotten about them. I ran over and swung the door open. There stood my sister Virginia, dumbfounded. I looked at her sideways. Her watery eyes glistened. Her skin was colorless. She appeared drawn. Her spirit drained. She knew, but how? Is it true? My silence answered her question as we embraced, with wet tears streaming down our cheeks. How did you know? She explained they announced it on television. On TV? Yes, on the WWF pay-per-view show. Her 17-year-old son, Michael, was watching with some of his friends and called Virginia as soon as word broke of the fall. Then it came flooding back to me. The pay-per-view show. That's what Vince was talking about. That's why he asked me if I was watching the show. Right, of course. It was televised. Our eyes locked. Oh no, I said. That stunt. It was that stunt. The puzzle was being pieced together now. I had been in such a state of shock I had not understood Owen was working in front of an audience. Even when the doctor described Owen's fall, I didn't realize he was doing that stunt. How could I have missed it? I knew it was something that was coming up soon, but I didn't realize it was today. That stupid stunt, I said. The one he talked about. The one he said he didn't want to do. The one he talked about the night before he left. Of course. That stupid, meaningless stunt. I stood speechless with my sister, the door still wide open as we contemplated the shock of it all. She walked into the house, her arm around my waist. We kind of held each other up. Inside the house it was quiet, but outside there was much laughter and joy. As we entered the kitchen, I walked straight to the window and watched Athena playfully chase Oj in the backyard. They were having so much fun together. They didn't even realize their little lives changed forever. With my heart broken into a million shreds, I covered my face with both hands and broke down crying. Virginia gently guided me to the kitchen table where we both sat, staring aimlessly into space. Our quiet reflections were momentarily as the noise was soon began to escalate and wouldn't stop for days on end. Let's see. I will skip ahead a little bit. Here we go. Owen was the most cautious person I knew. He would never take an uncalculated risk. He was not a thrill seeker or an extreme person in any way. The thought there must be negligence was a disturbing revelation to me. I didn't know how or in what form the negligence was. I just knew it needed to investigate it further. But how? As different scenarios played out in my imagination, the phone rang as it had all night. I decided to answer it. It was Brett calling back. He explained no flights were available out of LA, and he doubted he could get back home until the next day. I barely paid attention to what he was saying, as a voice in my head kept repeating, "There's negligence." I wanted to tell him so badly that it was on the tip of my tongue, but I could trust him. But could I trust him? Would he think I'd gone mad? I decided to take a chance. "I think there's negligence," I said to Brett, holding my breath. "I'm sure there is," was his response. What a relief. I thought. He believes it too. We talked for a few minutes and ended the call by telling me the company he worked for, WCW, was trying to arrange for a private jet to bring him home. He told me not to worry. He would come to my house as soon as possible. Unfortunately, I could not take his advice. I had much to worry about. The news would be broadcasted shortly, and waiting for it was the only thing holding me together. Finally, it was 11 o'clock. I waited for the channel changer in my hand so I could surf back and forth. I didn't want to miss any of it. It was a top story on every station. They splashed still photos of Owens lying dead in the ring, being worked on by paramedics. I felt like the wind had been knocked out of me. All the reports described the fall in the graphic detail. Every report included pictures of me, Oj, and Athena, and it was punctuated by the catchphrase, "He leaves behind a wife and 2 young children." I was amazed at the footage and wondered where they got the family photos. Okay. I think the next thing I'm trying to skip forward to, I'm trying to quickly graze over it. Actually, I think that's probably where we'll cut it off with her book.
Okay.
For right now until our next part. She kind of just talks about trying to fall asleep, her inner thoughts. And she prayed to Owen that she would get to the bottom of what happened and get justice for him, if there's any justice to be had.
Yeah.
So, everybody has been informed. So let's hear Vince McMahon holds a press conference after Over the Edge. Let's check in on old Vinnie Mac and see how he's holding up after Over the Edge in 1999.
This is a stunt that's performed on a routine basis in any number of venues. Owen was simply to descend into the ring in superhero-like fashion.
Why was he not on a full A line or some other backup line, which is normally used for anybody that's using a rigging? That there would be a safeguard that someone would control.
I'm not an expert on rigging. I guess you are.
Well, it would appear that there were no
Jesus.
precautionary measures taken. Why not?
First of all, I resent your tone.
Oh.
I resent the sarcasm.
Oh
No,
my
I resent
God.
your tone, lady, okay?
Why
You know,
would
this
there
was a
not be
tragic
precautionary
accident. It's a tragic accident. Don't try and put yourself in the spotlight here, okay?
What
This
were your
was an
precautionary
accident.
measures,
Do you
sir?
understand what I'm saying? An
Sounds
accident.
like one of those
And
AI
everything
meme
that should have taken place in terms of rigging,
recordings
to our
that people put on
knowledge
Twitter.
at this moment, did take place. It was rehearsed in the afternoon, and everything was fine. And that's all I know.
Mr. McMahon, is it true then that Owen did practice 3 or 4 times during the afternoon and everything was set and he felt comfortable with it prior to the actual occurrence?
As far as I know, everything was fine during the afternoon. A number of rehearsals took place.
He seems like a stable individual after this.
Yeah.
Definitely not trying to, that's the word I'm looking for, be held liable for anything. So yeah, I kind of set the scene here as we try to wrap it up. Everybody knows the call has been made to Martha and the Hart family, to Brett trying to get home. Now, for part 2 here, they'll come out shortly after this. We'll dive into the funeral and then the family turmoil regarding a potential lawsuit against Vince McMahon and the WWF. And I feel like this is a natural breaking point here. We kind of get through all the tragedy, all the reactions from it from everybody, kind of set the stage. Before we go, let's try to lighten the mood a little bit.
Okay.
I found this video that was posted from that night of news reports from various network news stations. As we've heard multiple times through this, and there's a theme in this video too that I'm about to play that had to be reiterated multiple times that this was not a fake thing. It was real. Multiple Hart members thought it could be some sort of act that Vince was doing. But let's see, what do the news reports have to say about the death of a WWF wrestler?
City. During the event, one of the wrestlers, Owen Hart, was going to enter the ring coming down from the rafters. Something went wrong, though, and he fell some 50 feet to his death. Efforts to revive him in the ring were not successful. The event was on pay-per-view tonight, so there was no video of the accident. But wrestling fans at Kemper Arena talked about the accident when they left the venue this evening.
Okay. Tell me what happened with Owen Hart. Did you see it all?
Yeah,
what
I
happened?
seen it. It looked like he really got hurt, to be honest with you. A broken neck or something. He fell. I didn't see where he fell, but I know he fell and hit the corner post. Looked like he got pretty messed up to me.
What happened? Did you see what happened to Owen Hart? Did you tell what happened?
Yeah, it looked like he fell from the top rafters, and and kind of landed over the back of his neck. So I guess that's basically what happened.
Did it look like he got hurt real bad when you saw him?
Yeah, it really did.
Hurt real bad.
Pretty bad fall.
See him up in the rafters?
Yeah, it was like a rope broke or something.
Did it look like he got hurt really bad when he hit?
Oh yeah, you could tell. My aunt, she wrestled. She said that she thought he was dead when he hit.
Kansas City police and the World Wrestling Federation have confirmed the death of Owen Hart, 33 years of age.
Kansas City police say they are interviewing the show's producers about what went wrong, and the World Wrestling Federation, WWF, is not commenting. But the man who runs the building where the accident occurred says it looked like Hart fell before his cue.
He came down very quickly, and that's what caught my eye.
Pro wrestling in the 90s is big-time show business, pumping dramatics to build audiences. The top 10 wrestlers can make $1 million each every year if they can break through with a gimmick. And it's working.
A gimmick.
Pay-per-view receipts on a record
gimmick.
$140 million in 1997, $178 million in 1998. Old-time wrestlers like Lou Albano say the show business side has taken over, producing a violent mixture, part dance, part soap opera, good guys, bad guys.
He does not
with
like current
choreographed
WWF
steps
at this
and very
time,
little
though.
true sport.
In the old days, I believe it was a little more actual wrestling. Today, on maybe a 2-hour wrestling show, you might have 15 minutes of wrestling, and the rest is all theatrics.
Wrestling Observer magazine editor Dave Meltzer says even this first
Good old
death in the
Dave.
ring since
Looking
1976
jacked here,
will
I'll
not
say.
stop the pressure for more and more dramatic stunts.
Fans don't have the patience to watch this 45-minute slow-building plot. You've got to go bang, bang, bang.
Owen Hart comes from a wrestling family, from his 82-year-old father to his brothers. Tonight, the Harts say their brother died in a race for ratings.
Theatrics and stunts and high daredevil performances and stunts that really put the wrestlers at tremendous risk.
And tonight, the spotlight is on a show that some say looks more like a circus than sport, made even more dangerous when it strays from the script. Jim Avila, NBC News, Chicago.
Whoa, they have images.
Yeah.
And after Mr. Hart's body was carried from the ring last night, the show went on.
Fell 50 feet to his death.
We seen it. He was Owen Hart, the blue blazer. Hold on, let me talk.
These guys
he was
are
up and
absolutely
down on a cord,
blasted.
and all of a sudden it snapped, and he dropped, and they were pumping his chest.
I think everybody was trying to figure out whether it was part of the act or not. And I think
Can you imagine
people still
if
didn't
this
know for
was
sure.
part of the act? Like,
The World Wrestling
what,
Federation, which has
what would it even be
wildly
about?
popular in recent years, staged the
I don't
event.
know. Like, what's the end
Like-
game?
Yeah, like a superhero falls to his death. Maybe that's how they killed the Blue Blazer off.
And we will shortly. And as soon as we know something, you'll know something.
You climb into that ring and you never know when it could be your last time getting into a ring. I know what it feels like.
Hart's brother Brett is also a professional wrestler, as was their father Stu. Professional wrestling has courted controversy recently with its displays of profanity and sexual innuendo, as well as mock violence. Hart's tragic death Sunday did not help the industry's reputation.
Mock violence.
Watching fans cheer a show, and the fact that the World Wrestling Federation let the show continue, 1 hour after announcing that Owen Hart had died, it really is a black eye on the entire industry that already has enough of one as it is.
Hart was married and the father of 2 young children. Brian Cabell, CNN, Atlanta.
Fell to his death on live TV. And last week, millions tuned in for a stunt which could have ended in disaster as Robbie Knievel jumped the Grand Canyon. Have sports gone too far in the name of entertainment?
Have they? Why still?
Avoid that you can't help.
Stu Hart is enduring the saddest day any parent can imagine. Last night, his son, pro wrestler Owen Blue Blazer Hart, died during a live pay-per-view
Owen
event.
Blue Blazer Hart.
He just fell neck first and everything, and his head hit the top of his head hit the mat first.
The Harts are the first family of wrestling. Owen's brother, Bret Hitman Hart, is a superstar. Father Stu was a pro wrestler, and all of the Hart sons entered the sport.
We all have our impact on our parents, but it's so hard. My dad's so strong. It's so hard on him. You know. Owen's so careful about everything. Even he was such a high flyer, but he was so careful.
In other homes,
Jesus.
the question being asked is,
Yeah.
death-defying adventures, the so-called extreme sports, gone too far in the name of entertainment?
I was real confident I was going to go for it.
Robbie Knievel cheated death on live TV Thursday when he jumped the Grand Canyon. He brushes off his bone-jarring landing and his minor injuries.
Oh, goddamn.
By the time I got to the hospital, I was in so much pain I couldn't even breathe. So I broke 2 ribs, 6 and 7. My foot's about swollen down about half of what it was after a few days.
Robbie saw his famous father, Evil, wreck his body with similar exploits, and he dedicated this jump to a friend who was paralyzed during a stunt. But Robbie is not turning back from risking his life as primetime entertainment.
What the hell am I going to do next?
Even as Robbie recuperates, he told us he is making plans for new jumps in Europe and Australia. And Owen Hart's wrestling brother, Bret Hitman Hart, was scheduled to appear on The Tonight Show with Jay Leno tonight. But following his brother's death, he canceled that appearance.
So the question's asked: is wrestling gone too far?
Man,
They do not know that 10 years later, Vince will fake his own death.
Yes.
And I couldn't find video of it, but I read. This is to show how fucking disgusting some people are in the wrestling business. And you can probably take a guess on whose idea it was.
Okay.
They did a WCW show in the same arena, Campbell Arena.
Yep.
What's the pay-per-view called? The one where they have like the 3 cages on top of each other.
Because they brought that back for Ready to Rumble. Like the Terror Dome. I don't remember which the specific pay-per-view, but yeah.
A wrestler apparently got thrown off the top of it through like a table, like Mankind style.
Yeah.
And you know how Jim Ross had the solemn voice.
Yep.
Whatever. They mocked that, and they had like I don't know if it was what's his name? It's really late. I'm tired.
The Ed Ferrara guy.
It was one of they had the WCW announcers acting all like sad and sorrow.
Yeah.
Like essentially doing this angle.
Of course they did.
So, yeah, I wonder who was doing WCW television at that time.
Thanks, Vince Russo.
But if I can find that clip, I'll play it at the end of the part 2 here. But we're quickly approaching 2 hours. We typically don't like to do shows this long. You know, people's attention spans and everything. This ain't no TikTok podcast, all right? Yeah, you gotta be able to pay attention for more than 45 seconds. But yeah, make sure if you're watching this on YouTube, subscribe if you're not already. Hit that bell notification so you get notified when part 2 drops. Or if you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, you can also turn on notifications for those separate apps as well. Just make sure you're subscribed, and make sure to put on the alert when new episodes drop. So a little Spotify notification will come up saying Pro Wrestling Proverbs, new episode. You can click on it. All those will be linked in our link tree in the description of whatever service you're using. And like I said, follow us on all of our social medias as we're posting more Owen-related content this month. We have a bunch of stuff. And then Logan's History of Detroit Wrestling series will also continue to be posted throughout the month. A lot of new interesting stuff from that as well. So Logan, any final thoughts before we wrap it up?
As I've said a couple times now, this is just one of those things where wrestling history tends to treat the Owen fall as, Owen accidentally fell. There was the funeral. And then Team Vince versus Team Martha for the court case. And that was about it. But clearly, we talked for 2 hours. And we haven't even got to the true meat and potatoes of it yet. Or the true... Yeah. It's just baffling how little this is truly touched on. And I know it's a tragic event. But I mean... I feel like every year or so, a magazine or a podcast like ours will talk about the Benoit murder-suicide. And I think that besides this year, with it being the big 25 years of Owen, you really don't hear about it as much.
Yeah, I would assume probably here within the next couple of weeks, because we're doing ours a little early, because like I said, I'll be out of state here next week. So I'd assume other wrestling channels, I assume probably like Parts of Unknown or Cultaholic or whoever, will probably do some sort of video on it, since it is like an anniversary. It's like if I could come up with the idea of it for content, I'm sure others would too. But
right.
But yeah, so this will be part 1 of Over the Edge 1999, 25 years later.